Listeners, good morning. I see chat already getting things going in a big way. Welcome to the Stokastic.com NFL Strategy Show, Sims Edition. 10-game slate, lots of low totals, weird slate for sure. We already knocked out the matchup show, ownership, top stack show, first look. This closes out the work week, and then you got Greg and Neil tomorrow for the tournament strategy show. We got everything on Sunday as well, but happy to have you guys with us. As always, last night, just sucked, man. Jags, Saints, Phillies lose. I'm reeling a little bit here, but it is what it is. Anyway, Greg's going to help me feel better, give us some nuggets, some gems on today's show. We'll go over the Sims, see what's popping up, see if I can make some manual adjustments to get some Josh Dobbs in there with some ROI boosts. That's going to go well. What's up, man?
So, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, and good morning, everybody. Why is it that you are so keen on Josh Dobbs this week?
Because he just lets you get whatever you want.
All right.
And I want to get really good players everywhere else. I already said it's going to end in disaster, but yeah, hey, we'll see. We'll see. Now, you know what it is? You could look at some cheap quarterbacks and they open a lot up. I'm obviously I'm exaggerating when I say like every time. At this point, I've just created a stupid bit going into week 7. But no, I do want to see. Here's what I want to say. I very much want to see what type of lineups we get. Forget about Dobbs. I just want to see what lineups we get with cheap quarterbacks and what they look like. I want to see what it opens. I know it's going to open stuff up because I've looked at it already. But you have guys like Jacobs and Adams against Chicago. You have Stephon Diggs as a near double-digit favorite. We'll pay attention to wind in that game. Wind in the Baltimore game seems significant, 20-plus miles per hour. So it's at least worth discussing. But yeah, Greg, like you have a lot. You have Cooper Kupp, who already dominant in the 2 games he's played. A couple chalky running backs north of 7K. Travis Kelce on the slate in the highest total game. I just want to see what the Sims gives us as far as the highest simulated ROI lineups with some cheap quarterbacks this week.
Yeah, and if there was a week to really go after cheap quarterbacks, this is one that would
make sense. So.
Especially because I always like to start my NFL analysis by looking at our top stacks tool. And this is as flat as it's been the entire season.
Yep.
The team that is the highest odds being the top scoring stack for DraftKings scoring, it's the Rams, and that's with only a 13% chance. We only have 3 teams on the entire slate with a double-digit chance of being the highest scoring team of the day. And then behind the top teams, you've got like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 9%. And there's some teams grouped together at 6%. So it's very, very flat in terms of which teams have the best percentage of being the top stack. So I do expect that I'm going to be pretty spread out at QB and which teams I'm looking to stack.
Exactly. Again, this isn't like I've never been able to be the hot takes guy that just throws around wild shit. And then once every 3 or 4 months, you hit something huge and then you victory lap it forever. You know, they're out there, right? And some of them make a career out of it, whether it's betting. What's that?
Yes, at Eric Lindquist. He bought a whole house on doing that. He recently introduced himself all to his new neighbors because of Megan's Law. But yeah, Eric's big on that.
Dude, you can't say that.
Why not? It's just facts.
That's horrible. That's not true at all, guys.
100% true. It's why multiple times I had to suspend him from the YouTube channel because of multiple public indecencies and different issues that he's had. And, you know, he comes back, he gets a slap on the wrist, he comes back a week later. But yeah, it's good. Some of the neighbors are nervous that he's moved into the area, but he's built an entire career off some of these hot takes and victory lapping them.
So you're saying he can't live within 500 yards of a school?
So the other thing that's funny about it is he doesn't even know about Megan's Law, even though it pertains to everything he does in his life.
Right, we can't keep doing. We can't.
So here's what he tells me. He goes, "There's some girl Megan Slaw that lives in my area, and because of her, I have to introduce myself to all the neighbors." And I'm like, "All right, Eric, if that's what you think."
This is libel, man. You can't do this.
No, it's facts. It's recorded. That's why he has to introduce himself to the neighbor, because this is on the record. This is absolute facts.
And I'm on the record. I have nothing to do with this. Nothing. And I usually draw no boundaries. Anyway, so first off, atone for your sins here on the Friday morning strategy show. It's Friday, guys. Let's get happy. Let's be excited about this. See what we get. Take a single second. atone for your sins, the sinners in the sin pit today. I appreciate you guys have embraced that. We're going to have some fun with that throughout the year, maybe even further. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. If you're listening or watching after the fact, we see you. We know you're out there. And if you want to listen in podcast form, guys, every show that we have goes straight to podcast form after this, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. We got you covered. So, and podcast exclusives. Ben and I did an awesome one. I guarantee that you will walk away from Tuesday's podcast exclusive. It's about 30 minutes long with valuable insight that you did not have going into this week, because I did significantly. I know Ben did as well. And Greg and I are doing the podcast exclusive afternoon slate, whether you have to bookmark it to listen on Sunday or Sunday, whatever it may be. Today, check it out. We'll be doing that only in podcast form right after this. All right. So to your original point and what I was saying with Dobbs, it doesn't just have to be Dobbs, but on a week like this where you have a ton of these low totals, you're going to want to get a lot of, I think, like good players from these games. Now, there are also some really good 5K plays. I think so. Tight end, wide receiver, less at running back, where I might just be content with eating the chalk. But what are your suspicions going in before we look at the Sims? What are your suspicions that we're going to get the most of?
Sure. So a couple of things that stand out, and once again, just based on the top stack tool, because I do often notice that a lot of the players I end up getting through in the Sims tool is going to be pretty congruent with what ends up in the top stacks tool. So with that being in mind, the team that we have with the overall top stack score, which incorporates ownership, top stack odds, pricing, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the number one team to stack, with all things being considered, ownership, pricing this weekend. So with that in mind, Baker Mayfield is somebody who's going to be popping up here. I also think that we're going to be getting to some of the Seattle Seahawks as a stack. We have Kenneth Walker projected really well this week. They are fairly cheap as a stack as well, not quite as cheap as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they rate out pretty well. One that I'm curious to see is that we have the fourth overall highest top stack odds on the Chargers, and Justin Herbert's only projected for 1.7% ownership. So that could be a contrarian stack. So like those are a few things that I'm looking out for when we build the lineups.
Let's pull it up, Jacob. So here's what I'd like to do first. Let me fix this camera a little bit too. Let's go ahead and see just the top lineups out of the gate. Let me get this screen bigger as well, so we can be in business. All right. So first things first, a lot of Baker Mayfield. I get it. One thing I'm loving here, though, is it's Baker +1, Greg. So Baker +1 with a run back. Baker +2 with a run back. That's fine, too. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I love Mike Evans this week. I really do, against Atlanta. Geno and obviously keep an eye on DK Metcalf. Keep an eye on all of these guys. So that's just DK. That's just Kenneth Walker and Geno. Personally, my preference there would probably be to go running back, wide receiver without Geno if I want to get a little bit different. That's been crushing this year. Running back, wide receiver, fade the quarterback on that team. Geno's not super expensive. He's only $6K, so it's not going to kill you if you play him at all. But I think there's some really unique ways with that Seattle team to get a little different.
Yeah, and one thing I was just looking for here was the target share of Kenneth Walker, just to kind of get a sense for would I want to be stacking Kenneth Walker with Geno Smith? And the answer is not, unless there are wide receivers involved as well from Seattle, just because I'm looking through the numbers here for Kenneth Walker. Last 4 games, 3 receptions, 0, 3, 1. So I don't know that's somebody who I'm like super keen on combining with Geno Smith as his only stacking option. But even though we're getting to a lot of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, just what you said before, it's not like we're getting QB +3 stacks of the Buccaneers. It's like Baker Mayfield with either Chris Evans or Mike Godwin, most of those top lineups. And that's not a build that I have any sort of issue with.
No. Me neither. Not even a little bit. I will say one thing, though, and I want to just scroll down for a second, Jacob, to that Aiden O'Connell lineup. And I will say, if Aiden O'Connell starts over Hoyer, I don't think it's confirmed. Is it confirmed yet? I know it was looking likely. I said on Tuesday that I thought you could see him start because he started week 4, but I don't know if we've seen confirmation yet. If Aiden O'Connell starts, I actually don't hate it, but here's the one thing that I would rather do. And this is why I was talking about Dobbs earlier. Instead, see that Aiden O'Connell lineup, Greg. It's the 81.9 simulated ROI. Now, I understand why we have this 100%. Personally, what I would rather do, I would rather pay down at tight end to Trey McBride on the same team. Same amount of routes as Ertz last week, more snaps. Ertz is not the future here. And maybe this is just a brain play and not a Sims play, which obviously that's the case right now, not a projections play. I would rather take the savings on somebody like Trey McBride because I don't think there's a noticeable enough difference between these guys. And then I would rather upgrade one of these other running backs or receivers. That's just the way that I would rather play this. I would rather upgrade, like seeing that Aiden O'Connell lineup with Jerome Ford and Zach Evans. And then I just think I could do better from like a Dawson Knox or a Zach Ertz, where we've seen it all season long. Dawson Knox has like one game north of 17 yards. Trey McBride last game, it was a 10 fantasy point game, whereas Zach Ertz on the season, you look at the numbers, his targets have gone down considerably. That game for McBride is basically tied with the best game that Zach Ertz has had all year. I'll take my chances saving $600-700 on one of these guys and upgrading another position. That's kind of where I'm leaning in some of these spots if I want to go cheap quarterback.
Season high, just because you brought up season high in receiving yards for Dawson Knox is 25 yards. He's like a decent amount of receptions this year, but it's just really shallow target. So he has 14 catches for 92 yards on the entire season.
And that was week 1, by the way, Greg, that 25 yards.
Terrible. It's just not been a great year for him. And I know that they went out, they got Kincaid in the draft, but it's not like he's having a great year either. I think part of it is just the Bills have not been super efficient throwing the football this year. Josh Allen is underwhelmed a little bit. And then also maybe partially because Kincaid is in the mix. But yeah, Dawson Knox has not really had the best year.
No. So when you start looking at what some of these builds look like, if we're going super cheap at tight end and then maybe defense too, because we know that defense, just the volatility there, it's hard to predict. If you go really cheap at those and you already have a cheap, actually, maybe this is the best way to explain it. I want your thoughts on this too, how you would approach the cheap quarterbacks. For me, if I'm going cheap quarterback, I'm doing it so I can truly load up everywhere outside of that stack, because a cheap quarterback generally means that you're getting a cheap overall stack as well. Even if you guys had a feel for the Giants and you just think, hey, maybe this Washington defense gets exploited again. I think it's different than last week because Atlanta's offensive line isn't nearly as bad as the Giants, but fine. Let's just say that you have that lean. You're getting a very cheap stack. You want to go Waller and Wan'Dale Robinson. You want a single stack, whatever. You want to go Josh Dobbs. You want to double stack that with Marquise Brown and Trey McBride or something like that. You're talking what, 5,300 and 2,600. There's a few, there's some other teams. Those are just the first off of my head. Aiden O'Connell's different because it's, you guys get that. He's a backup quarterback as a rookie, but a lot of these guys you're not going to have to pay a premium for. If that's the case, the only reason I'm doing that is so I can pay up at mostly every other position. That's the only reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally think that makes sense. And by the way, because you'd brought it up before, I was scrolling through Twitter and just looking at different beat reporters. No confirmation that Aiden O'Connell is starting, but like you, I'm under the assumption that he's going to start. We're projecting him to be the starter. The last game that we saw Jimmy Garoppolo out, O'Connell started. The only thing that gives me some pause to not be like 100% confident is last week we see Garoppolo get hurt, and who comes in? It's Brian Hoyer, who was the backup last week, not Aiden O'Connell. So it is a little weird that when Garoppolo misses a game, Aiden O'Connell is apparently the starter. But in a game where Garoppolo gets hurt midway through the game, Hoyer's the guy they go to. I don't really understand what the logic is there, but I am under the assumption it's going to be Aiden O'Connell.
My guess is, because Aiden O'Connell was inactive last game, my guess is that when you're thrust into a role like that mid-game without game planning for it, you'd rather have your experienced veteran. If you have a whole week to prepare for it, you can roll with Aiden O'Connell. That was my assumption. I don't know, but I think that would probably make the most sense,
Yeah, no, that would make some semblance of sense to me. I mean, still, I think whoever the backup quarterback is should probably be the backup.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm just trying to make sense of what happened, not what, I don't know. But if we were to go hold on. Michael said, better strategy, get top tier wide receivers or top tier running back. Which position should I pay up for? You know what, man? That's a good question. I know it's a sim show, but I'm sure Greg doesn't mind talking about this either. Ownership, I think, plays a significant role there. If you're getting very little ownership to like Eckler and Barkley, fine. The only problem I keep running into is like Barkley's coming off a massive volume game, but then what leads us to think that Josh Jacobs isn't going to see the same thing as well? You know, he's one of the league leaders in touches. When Aiden O'Connell started in week 4, Devontae Adams had a 33% target share, and Josh Jacobs was at 29% with a season high 11 targets. He's also going to get a lot of work on the ground. Tyson Bagent is starting for the Bears, so it shouldn't be like some blowout in the other direction. That, I guess that's what I'm running into is, do I really want to pay the additional $700 for guys like Barkley or whatever when I'm getting super high volume, talented guys in that 7K range? Not to mention, I don't know if Zach Charbonnet is even going to play because he didn't practice Thursday with a hamstring injury. So then you could just be looking at somebody like Kenneth Walker as not that he already hasn't been a bell cow, but like a real, 85, 90% snap share type play.
Part of this too is because what are we considering a pay up? Because there's a really wide range of what different people consider pay ups at times.
I was assuming like 8K and up.
Yeah. If it's 8K and up, the answer to me is pretty easily going to be wide receiver.
Yeah.
Because you have so much more, especially in 2023 at NFL, there's so much more talent at the high-end wide receiver from a fantasy standpoint. There's high-end running backs. And it's also not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer. It's going to be different slate to slate. If I had to generalize to answer the question that we got here from
Michael.
Who was it? From Michael. So if I'm going to generalize, it's going to more often be wide receivers than running backs for me. And for this weekend in particular, it's going to be wide receivers more often than running backs as well, because the options we have at the expensive end at running back, it's Saquon Barkley, who, sure, he's gotten a lot of volume this year, but he's been wildly inefficient. He had a dud of a game last week, even though he got like 30 touches because he's getting like 1 yard each time he touches the football. The other pay-up option is Austin Eckler at $8,600. We've got a handful of guys who are projected better than both Eckler and Saquon Barkley that are considerably cheaper. Guys like Kenneth Walker, Josh Jacobs, you mentioned both of them, Lofty, and then also some other running backs like Pacheco. We've got really cheap running backs to go to like Jerome Ford this weekend. Whereas if you go to the wide receiver position now, and I look at our projections here for wideouts, we've got the high end are the top projected players. Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And when I look at the slate overall, what's more likely to happen? Is a running back who's priced at like 5K, like a Jerome Ford, more likely to outscore Saquon Barkley? Or if I'm looking at the wide receivers, is it somebody like Cortland Sutton, Terry McLaurin, Marquise Hollywood Brown? Like, are these guys more likely to outscore the Amon-Ra St. Browns, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupps of the world than Ford is to outscore Barkley? And I think it's pretty clearly the cheaper running backs by that comparison make more sense than the cheaper wide receivers. So pay up the wide receiver.
I get it. But you know what else? You can also just go one really high-priced receiver with 2 good running backs and then get some of those 5K receivers who are in good spots as well this week. It's not one size fits all here at all, because I'm with you. But Zay Flowers, 5,700 against Detroit. Terry McLaurin against the Giants. This could be the McLaurin game. Marquise Brown against Seattle if they're playing from behind. There's not a ton I love here. I would have loved George Pickens if Deontay Johnson was out. That would have been one of my favorite. That would have probably been like one of my biggest stands of the week, is just going to a ton of George Pickens and hope that Kenny Pickens continues to air it out to him. Kenny Pickett, continues to air it out to him. But it looks like Deontay Johnson's going to be good to go.
Yeah, and Deontay Johnson going to be his first game back from a hamstring injury. And yeah, same page as you. George Pickens is somebody who I've liked playing in tournaments without Deontay Johnson for upside, and he never really got priced appropriately. Now, it's a moot point. It doesn't matter at this point because Deontay Johnson's going to be back. But yeah, he was somebody that looked really good for a short period of time there.
All right. So we got exposures. Let's go. So we favored at 150. By the way, this is our Sims tool. If you guys were curious, I'm assuming that many of you who are watching already know what it is. If not, and you wanted to get access to this for free for the entirety of the week, So you'd have, Sunday, Monday, Thursday, all of those slates. Like if you go back and you were to use the drop down and see what slates you can run the contest generator and the Sims for, it's literally every single slate, every turbo, every main, or every showdown slate, everything. If you go to ownersbox.com, using the link that we have in the description or chat, use that because otherwise we can't find you. Unfortunately, we can't take your word for it. Click that link. You don't need a promo. Just click the link. When you sign up, all right, just deposit $10. Now, my recommendation, as always, I'll always tell you guys, they have a $500 first match deposit bonus, and there's been a ton of overlay there specifically on the main slate every single week. So if you have the means to do so, you're going to want to get some money onto that site in order to really play there. But regardless, $10 minimum on a site that has super flex contests, which means we don't even have to talk about defenses there. A lot of overlay, a big deposit bonus, and every single tool that we have for free. The Sims tool, the contest generator, the lineup generator, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Ownership projections, player projections, top stack tool, boom bust tool. What else? Oh, all of the showdown simulation tools. Top single game showdown plays tool with the leverage scores, optimal rates, top play probabilities. You name it, guys. Premium Discord as well. Come in, say hi, sign up. And then after you deposit, shoot us an email at support@stokastic.com. We can put that in the description or in the chat as well. The best way to get all of our tools 100% free for the week and go play on a site that's got some big first place prizes on the main site. Not only that, they've got a lot of overlay and a very cool format that is yet to be solved as far as Superflex goes. So best way to get yourself in the door. It's going to cost you $10, a whole lot less than a package that's generally $200 a month for every single tool that we have on the site. You won't need any add-ons either. This isn't like, I got a free week and now I need to get add-ons. No, you get in every single tool we have for NFL is yours for the entirety of the NFL week. All right. Let's take a look at some exposures here because I want to see what quarterback exposure looks like first. Then that's going to kind of open everything up. We're pretty much going to know there, Greg, what everything else, not everything else, but what a lot's going to look like. All right. So just sort by exposure. Wow. It's really balanced. Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow. That's the most balanced I've seen. The flattest I've seen our exposures in all the weeks that we've done this show.
Yeah. And I thought it was going to be a little bit more of Baker Mayfield just because of what the top stacks tool was showing. But yeah, I mean, there are no teams that have predominant top stack odds. So I don't think this is a terrible way to build lineups. We're talking about it at the top and what our expectations were. We were saying we thought it was going to be spread out. I didn't think it was going to be this spread out in terms of QB exposure, but I don't think it's a bad way to attack the slate.
Can you scroll down? By the way, I like that we have positive leverage on Lamar Jackson. Keep scrolling down a little bit because a lot of people in chat this week have talked about Jordan Love getting about with the field on him, slightly over the field on Josh Dobbs. They have to boost that a bit. Not a lot of Justin Herbert. There's the interesting one, right? Of the highest total game. Justin in chat, what's up, Justin? Mentioned earlier that from all the shows he's listened to this week, the Kansas City game and Chargers has actually felt less talked about than it should be. And I don't disagree with you. Maybe if the prevailing sentiment across the industry is that we just get less of this game, maybe it's time to course correct and change course. Because earlier in the week, Greg, I was saying how I felt like this could be a clear under game that stays close. And I don't know if I want to figure out which one of the non-Kelsey options in Kansas City is going to be the guy. Maybe I'm looking at this all wrong, and maybe the field is just sharper than they were, and you kind of have to like reverse engineer all of this.
Yeah, and one thing I thought when you wanted us to scroll down a quarterback, I thought you were just looking for Josh Dobbs there. You wanted to see where Josh Dobbs is coming. We got to something, not a crazy amount, but we had.
Don't worry, we will boost him on the show to see what happens.
So we'll see what it changes with our exposures when we do the Josh Dobbs boost. I am kind of curious to look at what our wide receiver and running back exposure is before and after and how it impacts them. But as far as that Chiefs-Chargers game, yeah, I do like trying to force myself to a little bit more of Justin Herbert just because this is a game that, and I know the players are individually overpriced. Herbert's expensive. Austin Eckler's expensive. Keenan Allen's expensive, although I'm less interested in the Eckler piece of that equation. But since we do have this team as not being all that popular as a stack. There's some ownership going to Keenan Allen, some to Palmer, but not to Justin Herbert. I think it's pretty interesting to build lineups where you go Justin Herbert at QB, double stacking with Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, and then you have a very, very unique looking lineup.
Absolutely. And it certainly appears that way. Herbert, our projected ownership on Herbert is also very low. Can we do this? You know what, Jacob, go back to lineups. Do you remember how Greg showed you last week on the right side? I think it was, where was it? I think it was down, right? Yeah, there. Let's see what the Herbert lineups look like. This is what I want to know, right, Greg? Like, how do these lineups look any decent?
All right. So if we look at Herbert lineups.
Oh, that's not bad at all. I don't love the +3 all that much, but I might make a swap there at a tight end or something, but that lineup's not that bad. I like that.
Herbert with Allen, Palmer, and Gerald Everett. And then the other Herbert lineup, I don't like the second one quite as much, where it's Herbert with
me neither.
Eckler and
Palmer.
But yeah, I like the top one, even though it is the triple stack.
Yeah, like I'm not huge on the double tight end there on the third one, but yeah, the first one I like a lot. What I would do is I'd probably make one swap there. I'd probably end up swapping out one just so it's not a QB +3. Maybe you don't have to.
So here's the question then. Which of those players between Allen, Palmer, and Everett would you be most apt to swap off of if you wanted to remove one?
Probably Everett, because he gets 0 opportunity in the red zone.
Tight end just sucks so hard that I'm kind of inclined to just play a lot of tight ends with my quarterbacks because I hate the position so much on most slates. So that's going to make me probably say Palmer as the answer if I had to move off of one. But I don't really hate that as a triple stack either.
I truly don't. You're right. I've just soured on them a little bit this year. And to be fair, Everett does have 2 targets inside the 5, inside the 10. So it's not like he hasn't been involved there at all. He has. That would be my favorite Justin Herbert lineup. All right, go back to exposures. Let's take a look at running backs here. When I mentioned earlier in the week and throughout the week that I'm very happy just to eat a lot of chalk at this position, specifically Walker and Jacobs. So I'm hoping, Greg, that this is, yeah, there you go. It's not surprising. The volume's just massive.
There's something. Oh, there we are. So we have Jahmyr Gibbs in 8% of lives. We just got an update like a minute ago on Jahmyr Gibbs, which is why I was curious to see what we're doing with exposures here for him, because David Montgomery, he's banged up right now. Here's what we just heard as a quote from Dan Campbell, coach of the Lions. He said that Gibbs will need to take the load of the work in week 7. I'd like to say that we're going to be careful with him, but the reality is that we need him. Now, we've found out so far this year, a dirty, filthy liar, this Dan Campbell, particularly when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs and the things that he said about him. But in this particular scenario where Montgomery is banged up, I think he might be telling the truth with Gibbs and that they're going to have to lean on him a little bit more. So with that in mind, interesting to see that we got to 8% of Jahmyr Gibbs, and I do think he's a reasonable guy to get to. He's burned me multiple times this year, and I'm ready for it to happen again.
Yeah. All right, so here's the way I look at it. I can tell you right now, I will massively deboost Zach Evans.
Okay.
I think I have to. It's not my choice. It's not free will. It's just I have to do it.
Do you think Henderson plays a bigger role this week than
I don't
expected?
care. I don't feel like figuring it out. Like, I'm serious though, man. This is a guy that hadn't touched the football all. You know, when you look at the NBA and a starting point guard goes down, like let's say those times where it would be, Chris Paul goes down, Devin Booker's still out. Cameron Payne is just an obvious smash spot there, right? Or would have been just an obvious smash, even if he only plays 20 minutes at close to minimum salary. You're jamming Cameron Payne every single time. Give me another good example of a point guard that goes down, or a center. The center's another perfect position. Like, oh, okay, Ayton's out, Bismack Biyombo, we can do that, right? Because minutes and opportunity. You don't need to be particularly efficient if you're out there at a center or point guard position, you're going to get chances. At the running back position, like there's touchdown equity, there's opportunity share, which who knows if Zach Evans is going to get it. And then there's just efficiency. Like if you're wildly inefficient and we can't project really that well your opportunity because it's Sean McVay's backfield and Ronnie Rivers and Kyron Williams are out. It just feels like such a gross spot to me to be like, if he's 17%, it's just a spot I want to be under on. And I'll be, if I'm wrong, I'm fine with it, but I don't want to get burned because I'm overweight on Zach Evans. That's kind of what I'm saying.
So I agree with you. The reason, like slightly different logic. So the final result of what we're coming to, I'm on the same page as you. I don't want as much of Evans as the field has. For me, though, it's because they have so many options in the back right now, and all of them are terrible. But like you said, there's not this opportunity where somebody has to be the starter who gets all the touches. Number one, they have a very efficient passing game. I think this team might be happy to just run the ball 12 times the entire game and just throw the ball a ton to Cooper Kupp and to Puka Nacua. The other thing, too, is I don't think Evans has to be the guy. They have Henderson now, which to me is a pretty big key in all of this. And Henderson, who's not in the DraftKings pricing right now, I wouldn't even want to play him if he was available, but he's some familiarity with the system. I wouldn't be shocked if he's the running back who ends up getting the most touches this weekend, because we've seen Sean McVay do this with running backs he's just comfortable with. We've seen him do it with Darrell Henderson in the past. Even though they didn't bring him back this year, I still think there's a sense of he's been on the team, he's familiar with the offense, Sean McVay trusts him. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, hey, the Rams run the ball 12 times this weekend and like 7 or 8 of them go to Henderson. So I'm going to be underweight to the field on Evans as well, just because I think the field is all assuming he is going to be the guy, which I'm not sold that he's going to be. And even if he is, I don't know he's going to be effective.
No, we're actually saying the exact same thing.
Okay.
We're not arriving at the same place differently. I'm saying that you have to both project that he's going to actually get the volume, and then he has to actually be good. You know,
yeah.
Like in basketball, you know that if a guy, certain backups are just going to get all of the if they suck, they suck. But you're like, all right, well, we got the 30 minutes. They just missed the shots, and every time they had an assist opportunity, they couldn't get there. He played 30 minutes at center. He's a 7-foot big man, and he somehow only had 4 rebounds. That sucks. Whatever. But I'll play him again tomorrow. It's different with Zach Evans. Now, on the same page, go back to our running backs for a second, Jacob. When I say like just chalk in general, I want your thoughts on these guys because I like Walker a lot. I like Charbonnet's out too. That's huge. Jacobs, love him. I don't care if he's been inefficient. The volume should be there. Pacheco, I like. He's becoming the bell cow there. Rachaad White, as gross as it feels. Was that the one you were talking about earlier that you said has burned you?
Oh, Gibbs.
Oh, Gibbs. Okay. Like Rachaad White has burned plenty of us, but I like Rachaad White this week too. We're getting around the field on him. Just looking at these guys that are all getting some ownership, I'm not really opposed to it because I expect the volume to be there, and then I'll live with the results if the efficiency's not. I just don't want to guess on both.
Yeah, no, same page. And also when it comes to Rachaad White, I think he's a pretty solid option this weekend. He's been so involved in the offense. He's on the field a ton. He has one of the highest snap shares of any running back that we have in the league. He's in the game in passing situations. He's in the game in goal line situations. He's had a bunch of difficult matchups lately. I mean, we've seen the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play against teams like the Eagles as of late, and now he's finally being put into a good matchup on paper where we have the team here in the Buccaneers that are near the top of our top stacks because we're expecting this team to put up points this weekend. So I do think that this could be a Rachaad White breakout game from a fantasy perspective.
It's very possible. And even last week, as gross as that game was, as terribly as they played, they tried to put Keyshawn Vaughn in there, and he was way worse than Rachaad White. And White still played 80% of the snaps. We had a comment from, and by the way, guys, reading all these comments too, if you're tossing comments into the sin bin, we see you, and the good ones I'm more than happy to talk about. What's up, Colin? Colin said, this is why stacking Stafford, Cup, Nacua. I'm assuming that was supposed to be another slash. Will smash and be lower owned than it should. Well, there's absolutely zero guarantee that it smashes, but I don't disagree. Like I would rather get to Stafford stacks than I would that backfield this week for sure. Like I'd rather get to Stafford stacks than the backfield. We've seen the Cooper Kupps and the Kyron Williams lineups crush without Stafford. We've seen Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams lineups crush without Stafford before Kupp came back. I think you could see a different approach here against Pittsburgh for sure. So I don't agree with you that it's just going to smash, but I agree with you that I would like to position myself for the event that it does smash, Craig. I also am not convinced that Zach Evans at the when all is said and done with our ownership is going to be projected at 17% either.
Yeah, I tend to think he's going to go down, particularly because there are a lot of good running backs to roster this weekend that are fairly cheap. So if you give me an over under and say, will Evans end up being projected over under 16.6%? I think that was the numbers on the screen. I'll take the under on that, Mark.
Clayton said, if you want to, and what's up, Clayton? Good to see you, man. If you want to tweak more than one player on a Sims created lineup, is it better to just build what you want at your own peril? Yeah, look, when I say I'm swapping guys out, I'm just saying that speaking in generalities, like, okay, I like this lineup, but my own thoughts. Like if you're trusting the Sims tool, it's probably wise. I found it easier just to do ROI boosts and stuff like that, and then use those exact lineups. I mean, I guess to some extent it's kind of like swapping, but it's not because it's lineups that are already built. What are your thoughts on that? Like if you're swapping players out on lineups that are given to you in the Sims tool?
I don't do it personally. I mean, part of it too is because I've been playing 150 lineups every week for NFL. So like I'm not too particular about each individual lineup. What I do is I look at my overall portfolio of lineups and look at the individual exposures. And if there's a particular player, like you said before, Lofty, if there's like Josh Dobbs, just like I want more of Josh Dobbs, whatever that reason might be, I do the ROI boost up and I look at the totality of his ownership that I have in my portfolio of lineups, but I'm not looking at each Dobbs lineup individually to figure out if I like that lineup or not. I generally tend to think that like if my exposures are what I want them to be, the Sims tool is going to give me the individual lineups that are good.
Right. Colin, I wasn't trying to put words in your mouth, man. You said this is why it will smash and be lower on. Maybe you meant something different than that, but this is why stacking Stafford, Kupp, Nacua will smash and be lower owned than it should. I think I'm interpreting that correctly. Apparently not. Sure felt like it. Anyway. Okay. Wide receivers. Let's go wide receivers here. Without looking, who do you think are the highest exposed wide receivers right now?
All right, so I'm going to assume one of them is Keenan Allen just because we were looking at Chargers exposure before and we had like 20% of him. So I think
bet Mike Evans too.
Yeah, so I'm going to say Mike Evans. I'm going to say Keenan Allen. We had a good amount of Geno Smith, but I think a lot of those stacks might be Kenneth Wall. Like I don't assume we're going to get to a bunch of like DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. I'm just gonna say Evans and Allen.
All right, let's see. Yeah, Allen. Evans is up there, so we're not far off on that. I should have known Flowers. This upsets me a little bit. I was really hoping that this Baltimore team would be lower owned because everyone just is so high on Detroit's defense right now, rightfully so. But man, Zay Flowers at that ownership. I just wish he was lower, 16%. It seems pretty high on him. Diggs is up there. I'm perfectly fine with that. But you know, one thing I'm seeing, I would assume that you're noticing this as well. Look how crazy this is. We're essentially matching the field on almost every single one of these players that we have the highest exposure to.
Yeah, pretty flat at wide receiver relative to the field. I'm curious, can you sort by leverage to the right there, Jacob? I want to see who we're overweight to. Right? Because there's probably got to be a wide receiver to, yeah. So like we're getting to, I find it like George Pickens is somebody we're overweight to here. He's projected for low ownership. We're pretty overweight to Jerry Jeudy, who's projected for low ownership. But there's nothing like crazy as in anybody that we're like 20 or 30% overweight to the field to.
I guess not. There's no one significant at all. Like Judy, we're getting more of because I know we are getting a lot of Wilson. Pickens still getting a decent amount there. I wonder if we have Deontay Johnson in or out. Metcalf, see, okay, this is where things will change. If Metcalf, who didn't practice yesterday, is out, and Lockett, who practiced in a limited fashion, is in, or whatever with those guys, if and you have a $3,900 JSN, and then you have a $6,000 Lockett, this is where the slate changes dramatically, Greg, and that's a 4 p.m. game. I don't know if we're going to have that news, but that could change. If there's one piece of news that could change everything about this, I mean, everything. Like, you could run these sims and everything looks different. If DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett end up sitting against the Arizona Cardinals, that's because not only is it going to make things like, oh, more Lockett if Metcalf is out or vice versa, but then you have a $3,900 JSN who saw more opportunities last week than he has all season long. That's going to shift the foundation of the slate on every level.
Yeah, and Jackson Smith-Njigba has not had a breakout game yet. He was somebody who I think a lot of people were fairly high on prior to the wrist injury. He had an ADP of like 75 or 77 in best ball drafts prior to injuring the wrist. Then he gets hurt and his draft stock plummets, and then he never really got going in the offense in any kind of real meaningful way at the beginning of the year. I do think the injury played a part in that. He is still somebody that I think is a very talented wide receiver. If he's forced to play a bigger role because there's an issue with Metcalf and or Lockett, like you were mentioning, I do think he'd be a very, very good low-cost wide receiver to get to. Let's see, what is his salary? He's only $3,900.
Yeah, he's $3,900. He's very cheap. Realistically, you could have a Seattle Seahawks team without Zach Charbonnet and without DK Metcalf this Sunday. Yep. That's possible.
Yeah.
And we're already getting 32% Kenneth Walker. That would likely lead me to more lineups without Geno and just more Kenneth Walker, JSN, Kenneth Walker, Lockett lineups.
Yeah,
I like that build.
If Charbonnet is out, Walker is going to end up being my highest owned player by a very wide margin. And he's going to pop up a ton in the Sims tool as well. He's going to be very popular this week, and for good reason. He's probably going to be my highest owned player regardless. So I can only imagine what happens if DK Metcalf is out, if Charbonnet is out. Like, I can only imagine because I'm already going to get a ton of Walker. I know that for a fact. Yep. Let's go to tight end. This is where I'm okay just like making some of my own decisions because it's a garbage position. Look. So Andrews, I like. Obviously, Kelsey's in a spot that you can always get to. Highest total game on the slate. But come on, man. There's nobody else that you could not argue me for a moment that any of these guys are just must plays, including Luke Musgrave. Okay. Luke Musgrave's solid, fine, rookie tight end for Green Bay, whatever. But he's not, we haven't seen it yet. Zach Ertz is as pedestrian as you could possibly get. He's as pedestrian as you could ever get at the tight end position. Tyler Higbee, now that Kupp is back. Yeah. Okay. That feels great. Dawson. And by the way, you're going to get these results because the position's bad. Logan Thomas, fine. Yeah, I didn't forget about you guys excoriating me for that take last week. David Njoku, this position stinks, man. It always does. So it's if you have the salary to pay up for Travis Kelce, cool, go ahead and do that. But it's not viable to do that in every single lineup. Mahomes is going to be a quarterback I'm getting to this weekend. Kelce's clearly the most sensible stacking option with him. Andrews makes sense in some of those lineups that have Lamar Jackson. Outside of that, though, here are the tight ends I'm going to be getting to. The ones that correlate with my quarterbacks are ones that make sense as run backs in lineups where I'm playing the opposing quarterback. Because other than that, it's hard to really feel great about a lot of these tight end options. The position sucks basically every single week. It sucks to an extent that it almost rarely matters this year, where a tight end has been all that significant. Like we have the one Sam Laporta slate where he was really meaningful. But like week one, Isaiah Likely was in the winning Millie Maker lineup on FanDuel with one catch for 7 yards or something like that. And it just didn't matter because the tight end's been so shit this year that but the production is so interchangeable between a lot of the players that I don't really go crazy overthinking the tight end position. So it's just, if you got the salary, pay up for Kelsey or Andrews. If not, just who correlates with the quarterback or makes sense in a game stack.
I'll go to Laporta, and I might even go try and ROI boost some Darren Waller this week, though. I might just do it.
But Waller sucked this year also.
He's been terrible.
Will it matter to you who the quarterback is for the Giants?
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, he's getting like no ownership. I could have 5% and be over the field. I just want to have a little bit of Darren Waller just in case. Michael said, I'm absolutely not playing Seahawks because I don't want to split the purse 100 ways, go big or nothing. It's not really the way you should be looking at something like this. There's a million different ways you can differentiate with those players. Like, I don't know. We talk about this a lot, Greg, and you see it all the time with the Sims tool as well. It's still going to give you the best players. It's just going to give you full builds that are different, that are giving you leverage over the field. Looking at it as like a 1-for-1, can't play this guy because of his own. Josh just did an awesome video for like Evergreen and for the site on NBA ownership and boom bust. And he was adamant about like, stop fading the 70% guy because he's 70, just because he's 70%. Why wouldn't you get different elsewhere? And I don't think that's talked about enough.
So it depends, right? So Raheem Mostert was my most rostered player last week. I had Mostert it was very close to the field. I had him in 54% of my lineups, but part of that was because he was projected for like 25% ownership, and he came in just like massively on. So I was curious. I reran lineups after the fact in the Sims tool with the actual ownership from the field to see how it would change stuff. And I did only end up getting to 10% of Raheem Mostert when he was projected for like nearly 60% ownership he had in the Millie Maker. So it is going to be different in a top heavy payout. It's also different contest to contest. I think how you would approach him in like the $5 flea flicker that pays out like 10% of the prize pool to first place is different than how I would approach lineups where the Millie Maker pays out 33% of the prize pool to first place. So on one hand, I don't think Mostert is completely unplayable in hindsight on a slate like last week. The individual context of the lineups matters. But if I knew that he was going to be nearly 60% owned, just based on me rerunning my lineups after the fact, it would have pretty dramatically changed my exposure to him. I don't totally disagree with Josh, but I don't totally agree with him either, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but what he's saying is like you can just find ways to make your lineups different. Like, okay, for example, what is crushed this year? Like wide receiver, running back without quarterback. So, all right, instead of fading the high-owned Raheem Mostert and Tyreek Hill, play them together without their quarterback. You know, instead of fading a certain guy, play him in a unique formation that people aren't going with. I'm not saying it's like a steadfast thing that you have to do, obviously, but I just think the notion of always fading someone that's chalky when the field has just gotten so much sharper than it is over the past several years is going to get you into trouble a lot of times.
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be a break-even point with the ownership, though, where I'm never going to expect somebody to be, unless it's like a super crazy situation, I'm never going to expect somebody to be 60% owned in the Millie Maker. But there's got to be some sort of ownership if somebody's 80, 90%, where it's just way too high of ownership. And Mostert was pretty close to that for me last week. So yeah, it would have been very different how I approached my lineups if I knew his actual ownership going in.
Stack ownership. Can we take a look at our stack exposures, Jacob? While you pull that up, guys, we got 300 people here with us, and a lot of you guys are going to watch after the fact. The one good thing, if you live in these 6 states, is that you could have a bad week and still have a good week as a result. If you're in Colorado, Virginia, New Jersey, Ohio, Iowa, and more importantly, Kentucky. For some of you that have heard this before, that's okay. Just wait a second. We're going to pull up stack exposure in a second, but there might be some people that this can actually help out there. And if you're one of them, Bet365 is giving you $150 when you bet 5. If you're in Kentucky, they're giving you $365 when you bet $1. Absurd. And I mentioned it yesterday, but 3 new states are coming down the pike when it comes to Bet365. So keep your eyes peeled. Maybe you'll be in one of them. But you just sign up with the link in the description or chat if you want to get it. It takes 2 minutes to sign up, deposit. $10 is it, $10 minimum. You only have to bet 5 if you're in Colorado, Virginia, New Jersey, Ohio, or Iowa. You only have to bet 1 if you're in Kentucky, 10% of the $10. Takes 2 minutes. $75 a minute when you think about it, $150 in 2 minutes. If you're in Kentucky, it's 3. I've been saying, you're sitting on the can, firing off an afternoon dump following this show. Maybe you're listening tomorrow morning. Like, what can I do that's impactful in my life? What can I do that's going to benefit me? What can I do that's actually going to be positive EV in my own life? Scroll Instagram? Sure, those reels can be fun. Don't get me wrong. But this is just going to put money in your pocket. And we had someone the other day that said he took the 365 and turned it into like 4K. I remember the Ginger Hammer one where he took it and turned it into 6K or something insane. It's no risk at all. Your risk is $5, $1 if you're in Kentucky. So if you haven't done so yet, Colorado, Virginia, New Jersey, Ohio, Iowa, and of course, Kentucky, go ahead, take opportunity, take advantage of it. Take the free money, bet a parlay with the $5 or the $1. If you win, you got big money coming your way. If you lose, it doesn't matter. You got the 150 or the 365 anyway. It's that simple, guys. Win even if you lose. It's good stuff. Anyway, must be 21 years or older to gamble. If you or someone who has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in Kentucky, by the way. All right, wrap it up with some stack exposures here. See what we're getting to.
Yeah, let's go ahead and look at it.
Let's go. Not a lot of 3-man stacks this week. I think a lot of that probably has to do with these very low totals.
Yeah, the highest. Let's see. How many games are there with totals even close to 50 points?
None. There's one. Chargers and KC's at 48. It's down from 49.5. And then everything else is 45 or under. There's 4 games under 40.
Yeah, that's the lowest of the year by a pretty wide margin. Just trying to recall all of the slates off the top of my head. I mean, the game with the second highest total on the slate is Denver Green Bay at 45.
Yeah, they're low. 37, 40. Go up for a second, Jacob. Another 37, 37.5. Yeah, it's gross.
So you and I, after this, are going to be recording an afternoon slate podcast. If you guys haven't checked out the podcast channel yet, go ahead and do that. We do a lot of really cool podcast exclusive content. The early slate is going to be a disaster this week.
Big time.
It's terrible. There's only one game on the entire 6-game early slate that has a total higher than 40.5 points.
I know.
It's terrible.
Yeah. And I mean, Bills Patriots is basically all of those points going to one side.
True.
It's bad. No, it's bad. But I will say there's the Ravens and Lions. That's interesting. What's the afternoon slate look like? Because we're going to talk about it. 44.5. That's come up.
Yep.
I'm telling you, boys. I'm telling you.
Dobbs.
God, crash and burn situation. If you don't see me on Tuesday, you know why. Rams, Steelers, 44. Chargers, Chiefs, 48. Down to 46. That was 49.5. So that's come down a bit. And then Broncos, Packers has come up a bit. That was a 44. I'm seeing it's a couple 40 or 45.5, 45 for the most part. All right, so just let's hit stack exposures. I want to sort by QB +2 for a second. There's only a few quarterbacks that I think we could feel decent about with QB +2s in a game like this or a slate like this. We're probably going to get Baker Mayfield up there. Yes, 5%. Lamar, I'm fine with that. Mahomes, fine with that. Looking at these exposures, though, for stacks, I really don't mind seeing what I'm seeing right now. I'm actually happy that we're not taking a massive stand in the Sims on any specific stack.
Yeah, it's fairly spread out. We got double-digit Baker Mayfield, so it's like double the field on him, but I think that's a pretty interesting spot to be getting to. And beyond that, not anything too crazy. I don't typically make a ton of double stacks with Lamar Jackson just because his high upside games often end up coming with him running the football, not because he threw for like 380 yards and multiple touchdowns. So maybe like 6% double stacks of Lamar Jackson's a little high, but nothing too insane.
Before we switch over to the podcast, what are your thoughts here to close out this slate? We just talked about how gross some of the totals are. Looking at really flat ownership on a lot of these guys outside of maybe the top of running back position, but tight end, wide receiver, quarterback, all of these stacks, really flat exposures. Going into this one, are your thoughts that this just ends up being the same way once we hit lock? Because the injuries to Seattle are the X factor here.
It never ends up being exactly the same just because those injury situations always end up popping up. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to end up projecting a little bit better for us based on the news that we just got from Dan Campbell about how they're going to be utilizing him a little bit more heavily this week. But beyond that, it's just going to be, let's see what happens. We did have Pat Freiermuth was also ruled out while we were doing the show. He's not going to play. It looks like he might be heading back to the IR, re-injured his hamstring in practice. So a couple things like that are going to have impacts, but not like wholesale changes where somebody's going to all of a sudden be, like 50 or 60% owned.
All right. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate Jacob for producing this one, working the controls. Follow Greg at G Ehrenberg DFS, me at Lafayette_D on Twitter. And like I said, those 6 states, Bet365, get your free money. And if you want a free week of all of our tools, literally all of our NFL tools, everyone across the board, sign up at Owner's Box, use the link, deposit $10 or more. $500 first match deposit bonus is significant, especially with that overlay. And after you do that, hit us up. Give us an email, support@stokastic.com. I know I get a lot of DMs. I literally just answered one right now on this. If you're wondering where it is or you have any questions, my DMs are open on Twitter. So just hit me up there. I don't mind helping you guys with this. If you're trying to figure out what subscription you want or lineup, any of that stuff, no problem helping you out. But anyway, guys, stick around tomorrow because you got the tournament strategy show with Greg and Neil. That should be a good one. Sunday, we got you covered for 4 straight hours and a whole lot more beautiful stuff with NBA on the way next week. This is the place to be. So if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and tap that subscribe button. Until next time, guys, have a great weekend. We'll see you back here soon. Peace.